story, David. I'm giving it away. The phrase David and Goliath is synonymous with underdog, being an underdog. We love underdog stories, whether it's Frodo Baggins fighting off orcs and ring wraiths to deliver the ring to Mount Doom, or an unknown southpaw boxer named Rocky Balboa beating Apollo Creed, world champion boxer. Or I noticed lately a remake or a sequel to Daniel's son, learning how to do karate in Miyagi dojo and going up against Cobra Kai. And didn't we just last week celebrate a ragtag group of tea drinkers who rebelled against the British Empire? We love the underdog story, primarily because I think we see ourselves oftentimes as underdogs. It's an us versus them world, isn't it? At least it feels that way sometimes. We feel outnumbered, outfinanced, outpowered, out-technologied. And oftentimes we just feel like there's no hope. And so when we run across a story where the underdog overcomes and fights back and wins, we take inspiration from that. It's possible, we think. The giants that we face, addictions, patterns of behavior, struggles that just seem to never go away, wear us down. And we hope at some point we can be the underdog and overcome. So the story of David and Goliath is in 1 Samuel 17, and the story in and of itself is inspiring. Really, all I have to do is just read the story, go right to the closing prayer, and you think, wow, best worship ever. Just because the story is that inspiring. So let's start with chapter 17 of 1 Samuel. The first 3 verses deal with the introduction of the Philistines. Habitual problem for the Israelites, the Philistines. Constant thorns in their flesh. Just when you think they can overtake them, they defeat them, they come back and they attack again, and they just pop up all throughout Israel's history as a problem. The main reason they're a problem is because they're technologically advanced. They have learned how to manipulate iron and metals and bronzes so that they have the weaponry. Israel, obviously, in slavery for 400 years, you don't get too much technological advancement when you're enslaved. Philistines have been growing all that time. So they're a powerful enemy. Can't get that word out. So here they are, they're meeting in what's called representative warfare. Israel's on a hill, valley. Philistines are on another hill, facing them. Not going to war, just confronting one another. Ready to go to war. And we take it up in verse 4 there. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was over 9 feet tall. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. It's roughly 125 pounds. On his legs he wore bronze greaves and a bronze javelin with a slung, which was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and his iron point weighed 600 shekels, basically about 15 pounds. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I will defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. So just to give you a perspective of how tall Goliath was, I gave a slide to Brad to put up on the screen of the world's tallest man in recorded history. Get him up there. There he is. His name is Robert Wadlow. This is from the 1930s. He is 8 feet 11 inches tall. Just for perspective, his dad is on his right there, our right. His dad is 6'1". Goliath is at least another foot taller than him, if not a couple feet. We don't really know for sure because we're not really certain about how big a cubit or how long a cubit was. So there's some ambiguity about whether Goliath was 9.5, 10, or 12 feet tall. That gives you an idea how tall he was. Now this guy here he weighed about 439 pounds according to the record. So you can imagine Goliath is probably his 600-700 pound range, all clad in armor. Slightly intimidating. So he comes out and he says, let's do some representative warfare. I'll come out and fight. You send your best warrior out and fight. Whoever wins the war. It's not a bad arrangement when you're a giant. And so he comes out and he defies the Israelites and asks them to send someone. And as you read, or as we read together, their response was terror, dismayed and terrified. So in verse 12, we get introduced to the underdog, David. Now, David was the son of an Ephrathite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time, he was old and well advanced in years. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days, the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. So this taunt, this challenge, is happening every day for 40 days. And the wording here in the original Hebrew is such that when it talks about Goliath coming out, there's a time in which it stops saying comes out and it says he comes up. So what we see here is that Goliath ends up stepping out from the ranks on his hill to utter his challenge. And as time progresses, he moves down, across, and starts up with his challenge. That's the way of problems, are they not? That's the way of giants. They can't be ignored forever. They get worse. They get bigger. They get more in your face. They've got to be dealt with. So while Goliath is way over there, not so bad. But every day he's taunting and getting closer and closer and closer. To the point where the Israelites are beginning to recognize we've got to do something. Because it's not going to be long, he's going to be actually in our midst. And we'll have to deal with him. And so David arrives on the scene, sent by his father to deliver some cheeses and some breads and some replenishments for his brothers. And his dad wants him to bring back a report. So on verse 20, early in the morning, David left the flock with his shepherd, loaded up and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle lines, and greeted his brothers. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines, shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they all ran from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He'll also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel." That kind of tells you how bad taxes are. Go fight a giant, you get tax-free living. That's some bad taxes right there. But that's that little thing. Like, oh, all right, that's worth it. I go fight a giant, I get no taxes. David asked the men standing near him, What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, this is what will be done for the man who kills him. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Now what have I done? Said David. Can't I even speak? It's interesting sometimes the little things that the Bible puts in the stories. This squabble among the brothers. Kind of an interesting little family drama. Did we need to know that? Not really. But the Bible's about people, real people. This is a real family. I don't want to get off into this too much, but here's a fact of life that you'll find. When you choose to face a giant, whatever that might be, and you let it be known that you're going to fight this giant, don't be surprised that the people who you think might or would or should support you don't. I think what we have here are some brothers who are themselves ashamed that they haven't stepped up. And David's courage angers them. It's kind of a projection going on here. And so they try to undermine him, try to ridicule him. That's a common thing, unfortunately, in people and families. So he goes on in verse 32. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, you're not able to go out against the Philistine and fight him. You are only a boy, and he has been a fighting man from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off the sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. Saul said, go and the Lord be with you. A couple things here. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. When Goliath comes out and challenges, he says to the Israelites, pick a man among you to come fight me. Aren't you the servants of Saul? Now, you're there as a soldier. You're there as someone who potentially could go out and fight. Does that being called a servant of Saul going to encourage you? Does that give you any kind of a pump, if that's how you see yourself? I wouldn't think so. If Saul was so great, why isn't Saul going out and fighting Goliath? All these Israelites saw themselves as that, as servants of Saul. Big deal, big whoop. David comes on the scene. And what does he see? Things as they are, or things as he is? So he looks out and he doesn't see a giant. He never refers to Goliath as a giant. He never refers to his size or anything. He calls him an uncircumcised Philistine. That's all David sees, is this guy who is putting himself up against God. A defier of God. He doesn't see size. He doesn't see strength. He doesn't see armor. He sees someone who is rebelling against God and needs to be put in his place. Then how does he see himself? As a servant of Saul? He doesn't refer to himself that way. He sees himself as being part of the army of God. Now we're talking. I'm going to fight a giant. I want to be in God's army, not somebody's, Saul's especially, servant. That's how David saw himself. That's how he identified. That's where he got the courage. He wasn't fighting for himself. He didn't see himself. The story of this underdog, and I know we get into the underdog stories in movies and things like that, and that's all fine and good. But the point of this story of the biblical underdog is not believe in yourself. That's a world interpretation. Biblical underdogs don't believe in themselves. They believe in God, who can use them and will use them to do great things. This isn't a positive mental attitude story. God doesn't deal in that. We are strong. We are powerful. We can be conquerors, not because of who we are, but because of who God is in us. And that's what David knows. He goes on and starts talking about these occurrences with the lion and the bear. One thing that David has that I think we don't have, and one reason we don't conquer as underdogs, whereas David can, is faith stories. David was able to look back in his life and recall faith stories. He can recall times when God specifically intervened in his life and overcame danger and overcame risk. And he's able to draw back on that. Yeah, this guy's big, he's a challenge, but so is a bear. God let me fight the bear. So is a lion. God gave me the strength to defeat the lion. Why wouldn't I think now that God would give me the strength to defeat this giant? Yeah, he's big. He's got no teeth. He's got no claws. Yeah, he's strong, but so is a bear. I can do this. But not because I did it before, because God worked through me. David says specifically, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion, the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of the Philistine. David's not, again, believing in himself. He understands that God rescued him in the past, and God will rescue him now. I think this is a serious deficit in our faith, in our Christianity, that we don't have faith stories. Maybe we do, but we don't have an opportunity to share them. Think about a difference we would have as a church, as a group, but when we came together, there were stories told about how God intervened in our life. What would that do to our faith? What would that do to our courage? What would that do to our sense of being an underdog? If we could say, I've been struggling with this. God gave me victory. This happened this last week. I didn't know what to do, but God gave me the answer I needed. Larry was sharing with us this morning about being here yesterday cutting grass. Pretty mundane activity. Tooling around, turning the wheel, cutting the grass. Notice there's someone driving to our parking lot that doesn't belong here. That's unusual. So Larry, being the nosy guy he is, drives over there at 2 miles an hour. Do you need something? Is something I can do for you? It's a story. It's someone sharing hurt and pain. A lot of other people would have ignored him. A lot of other people would have said, okay, have a nice day. Larry lets God work through him, hearing this guy out, sharing some history of his own struggles. Here's what God's done for me. I think he can do it for you. This church would be a place for you to come to, where you can find some answers. That's a faith story. David had that. One final thing. Saul dressed, the best that Saul can say is, hey, good story. I like the bear and the lion thing. Go ahead, get the giant, Godspeed. Then he tries to dress him with his armor, the helmet and everything. This is Saul trying to tell David how David should fight. This is what we do. Saul's got armor. You need armor, David. This is what battles are about. This is how fights happen. This is what you need to have to be victorious. Take my armor, put it on you. That's just Saul trying to fight a battle Saul's way, not even interested in what God's going to do or what God can do. We kind of look at battles that way. What's been done before? What's been tried before? What's being suggested? What are they doing? And we need to match them. If they have technology, we need to grow on our technology. If they have political power, we need to become politically powerful to fight them. If they have political action committees, we need to have political action. That old phrase, fighting fire with fire, it's a dumb phrase. You fight fire with water, right? Why do we let the enemy tell us how we should fight? Subsequently in this story, Goliath is calling David out. Come on, let's fight. Let's get together. Let's do it. Inviting David to get into a hand-to-hand combat. Who's going to win that? We don't let the enemy define how we fight, because we don't fight on their terms. David did not fight on Goliath's terms. No armor, just a slingshot and some stones. God doesn't copy and paste. He doesn't gift us all the same ways. He doesn't have the same solution for every person. He doesn't make us each offer the same kind of solutions. He has uniquely made us and uniquely gifted us to fight in our unique ways. And for us to say, well, we're a church, we should have to do this way, and this way, because that's the way it's always been done, that's what everyone else is doing, it's just putting our armor onto somebody and saying, this gotta fit, make it work. But it doesn't. That's not the way God works. So David goes out and fights him, as you know. He actually doesn't just kind of slowly. Yeah, the wording here is he runs out to him. Goliath sees him. He too sees him as just the boy. He doesn't think of him as obviously as an army of God. So he tries to ridicule him and ridicule the Israelites for sending him out. But David says in verse 45, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. David does not believe in himself. believes in God. He doesn't believe in spears and javelins and shields. He believes in God's accuracy, God's strength, God's power. And he fights on God's terms. And he's victorious. We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. What are we? What are we? Small? Old? Technologically challenged? Or are we God's army? Gifted by God in unique ways. Holding on to God's truth and willing to give God's love. That's who we are. That's the kind of underdog that can win. Let's stand and sing.